From the 22 News Plus studio, this is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of In Focus. I am your host, Patrick Berry. Today's episode, we're talking about basketball, not the game you're familiar with today that you see at your local high school, at your rec leagues, or even as far up as the NBA, but the origins of the sport. Joining me across the desk today is Dan Genovese. He is the author of a book called Rough House. I will pull that up here. That's an image of the cover of the book right there. But Dan and I are going to talk about Dan, is it the origins of basketball or a different version of basketball?
It's really the origins of professional basketball.
Okay. All right. So do the old, let's go back in time. What years are we talking?
Well, when we start with basketball, it's James Naismith, and of course, we're in the home of
YMCA in Springfield.
Exactly, and he was looking to invent a game for a wintertime sport to keep his students involved, and went through a series of trial and error. Came up with ultimately a game of like lacrosse, but inside. But not using
like lacrosse?
Well, yeah, it has a goal.
Okay.
Both ends have a goal. It's a net. And at one point they were using boxes for each end of the court, so to say. But they were on the ground, and that was too rough. People were jumping into them, and it was kind of violent. So he said, "Well, I'm going to raise up the goal and put them up high." And then, of course, the peach baskets came around, and that was that's in the 1890s when the game was invented. And 10 years later, the professionals came
like wildfire.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
It did. It was the sport to play in the winter. And then all of a sudden, you had some YMCA teams that were very good and decided to become professional. They would charge admission to games.
Wow.
And they hired business managers, and all of a sudden you had this professional sport, primarily in the Metro New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey area.
Okay.
Is where the professional game started.
All right. So now when it was played here or, in any of our local areas, what was the facilities? Were they strictly in YMCAs? Or I'm trying to think, schools didn't have gyms back then, did they?
No, they did not. That's a great question. It's an amazing story of how it started. Okay, so it was any public facility that had a hall that was big enough to host a basketball game. And we'll get into that, the different size of the court.
Well, I was just going to ask you that. The original version is a much smaller playing surface than what we're familiar with today, right?
Correct. It's about just under half the size of a modern NBA court.
That small?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Because they didn't have civic centers. They didn't have the TD Garden. They didn't have gymnasiums or local schools. It was any good size hall to be indoors. That's where they played.
And here in New England, winters are cold, so you had to be inside during the winter. And Naismith came up with the concept of an indoor
recreational game.
Correct. Game. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So that was the late 1800s, but by the early 1900s, within 10, 15, 20 years, this game exploded.
That's right. And the popularity, people loved it. And that's when it became professional. People were paying admission to go into these games.
Okay.
And, the elephant in the room, so to say, is that they played in a cage.
Okay.
And that's the coolness of it. They played literally in a cage. Some of the original rules, or one of the original rules, was when a ball was going out of bounds, it's different today. If you touched it, your team retained possession.
Okay.
So what happened?
Conversely, whereas today's rules, you touch it, goes to the other team. Okay.
So what they did is, what they were doing is they were diving. They were going after the balls and ending up in the first couple of rows and injuring people. So they said, well, that has to stop, right? So what they did is they built a cage, literally a 10 to 12 foot high cage. And I think we got some pictures of it here. 10 to 12 foot high cages. As we said, less than half the size of an NBA court today. chicken wire. So the ball never went out of bounds. All right.
So to your earlier point of different rules of touching it going out of bounds, there is no out of bounds.
There is no out of bounds. It stays in bounds.
Okay.
Right. So again, chicken wire. So these these were 5 players on a side and 1 referee. And let me tell you something. These were rough and tough dudes. All right. They're from inner city of Philadelphia, into New Jersey, in New York, and they were tough Bowery dudes. They were rough and tough, and
not your 6.5, 7 foot tall.
No,
these are short and stocky.
Yeah, and
players.
I think I was born about 100 years too late
based on your stature.
Yes, and they didn't want the big tall dude. All right, because they were considered slow, freakish. They only had one purpose, and that could be under the hoop, but that was it.
Interesting.
Right.
So a completely different game than what we're familiar with now.
Right, and hence the title of the book, Rough House.
Right.
This game was rough. Right.
And it's a different term, too. It's basketball.
2 words.
2 separate words, not basketball like we know it today.
Right. Just like the original words of baseball,
right,
basketball.
Right. Okay. We are up on our first commercial break. We've only scratched the surface of the history of basketball, not only in this area, which we will get into, but across the nation. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of In Focus. I am your host, Patrick Berry. Sitting across the desk from me today is Dan Genovese. He is the author of a book called Rough House, which is a depiction and description of the early world of basketball. And it's nothing like you know it today when you sit and watch a game on the local or collegiate or national levels. Dan, thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time. I do want to, folks, we're going to cycle through a bunch of photos that kind of depict what the game used to be like. First one up I showed you earlier. This is the cover of the book Rough House that Dan wrote. Next one down is it looks like a jump ball, Dan.
Yeah, it's a tip off. Of course, when you start a game, and also with every basket that's scored, it's a tip off because the basket there was no hole in it. So after every score, the referee would release a spring, and the ball would come flying out, and they'd start over again.
So now the ball just goes through. You take it off the end line.
Yeah,
and just keep playing.
Right, and these scores wasn't like what you see today. It's not 102 to 109. It's 20 to 12.
Really?
Yeah, they were low scoring games, and we'll explain to you why. So this is your typical free throw. What you're looking
Pistol
at.
Pete Maravich, didn't he shoot underhand like that?
He might have been the last. He might have been the last era of that. So this is how you set up for a free throw.
Okay.
That's what it was.
So I'm going to switch. I'm going to come back to the camera because you have an example of the ball, Dan.
Yeah. Can we see it? All right. This is of course, a replica of a basketball at the time. It was slightly larger and slightly heavier, not medicine ball heavy, but it was a heavy ball.
Okay.
And very inconsistent.
With the stitching on that, did it bounce?
Well, double dribble was legal. Because if you tried to do this with one hand, the ball's going to go this way. Plus, the floors are inconsistent.
Okay.
There was no parquet floor back in the day. It was wherever you had a big hall, you would play in.
Okay.
In Westfield, they played at the Gem roller rink. So the roller rink had nice wooden floors. So that was probably one of the best floors in the league.
Where was that roller rink?
The roller rink is also the Gem Opera House. All right. It's right off of North Elm Street, kind of towards the back. It's gone now, burned down in a fire. Now there's a kind of a factory there.
Oh, interesting.
But they had the best floor in the market because it was. But otherwise, you had different types of floors. In Chicopee, they played on a concrete floor, and what happened there is there was a lot of condensation. So they were the first team to wear rubber-soled suction shoes. Sneakers, manufactured by Spalding, and they were suction shoes, and so they had a kind of an advantage over these other teams who were slipping and sliding. But yeah, you couldn't bounce this. You couldn't have a bounce pass and be effective because the ball is going to go not where you want it to go.
It could go anywhere.
That's right.
It's like trying to bounce pass a football.
Yeah.
You don't know where it's going.
It's wobbly and warped.
Right. So that's the type of free throw.
Yep. All right. Ed Watcher, Hall of Fame. My problem is there's only 2 people from this era that are in the Hall of Fame.
Here,
only
the
2.
Naismith Hall of Fame in Springfield.
Only 2.
Really? This guy, Ed, and this guy, Frank?
Frank Morganwick was a contributor, was a coach, was a player, spent 40 years in the game. And
were these gentlemen local to Western Mass or no?
No, they were not. They were from like I said, the Metro, New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey area. And, and they would, a lot of these players, there were 3 leagues basically during this time period. We're talking 1902 to 1903 and 1903 to 1904. There's only 3 leagues considered major professional leagues. And then, Springfield, Westfield, Chicopee were in the New England Basketball League or the Central Massachusetts Basketball League, which was considered a major league. And so these players would also play in these other leagues at the same time. And
so you have players playing in multiple leagues.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Which is really the downfall of the league itself, because you had these players you working the system. They would say to the owner of the team, and there's conflicting nights, hey, I have a game up in Westfield tonight. How much do you really want me? So they would pay them. Right. And then they wouldn't show up to the Westfield game or vice versa, depending on, and they get a little extra income for that.
Makes sense.
They were getting about $5 a game.
Back then, that's decent money.
It was. And
how many games in a week?
Oh, they would play 4 games a week.
Really?
And here's the other thing: they would play Thanksgiving Eve, Thanksgiving, twice on Thanksgiving, 2 different towns. The day after, same thing with Christmas. Christmas Eve, twice on Christmas. Christmas Day
weren't like they are today either. Families would go out to do something.
Right. Well, because you didn't have TV.
Right.
But, so sports on a holiday is not anything new. It's been going on forever.
But these weren't professional. Well, I guess, were they professional athletes or were they?
They were professional. They were paid.
Okay. So they're professionals.
They charged admission.
Okay. But did they do other things? Like, were they construction workers, farm laborers?
No.
Okay.
No,
this was their thing.
Yeah. Some of them were actually war veterans of the Spanish-American War.
Oh.
So they had some of these players you would read about had yellow fever, so they wouldn't show up to a game, or maybe that was their excuse. And or they were just at the game and they wouldn't play because they were war veterans so
right.
It was
fascinating.
It was
interesting. Let's go back to some of these photos.
Sure.
Okay, so there's Frank.
Yeah. Henry Martins. Okay. And this gentleman should be in the Hall of Fame because he played professional basketball in the Springfield area, and he's also in this picture. He's the mayor of Springfield in the 1930s.
Really?
And the leagues wanted to impose a salary cap of $25 a week. And Henry was like, no way, I'm not playing. You can't have a salary cap. So he fought it and probably got paid a little extra. But here's the mayor of Springfield in the 30s. We're talking 1903, and he's playing major professional basketball. So
right.
Why is he not in the Hall of Fame? Just because.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a local guy.
That's right.
He's a local guy.
That's right. This is the Westfield team. Again, some tough-looking dudes, man.
I don't think there's anybody in there above 5'10".
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. But none of them are really like big and muscular. But this was a physical game.
Right. Right.
What do you got? 7 guys on the team back then?
5 on the court.
Yep.
And you usually traveled with maybe 1 extra.
Okay.
So
that brings up a very good question. So that was the Westfield team that we just saw. How far would the Westfield team travel?
Okay, so the Western Mass Basketball League was pretty much just that. We're talking Chicopee, Pittsfield, Hartford, Thompsonville, Connecticut. And that's it. Just the general Western Mass area.
All right.
And
so these guys weren't traveling to Philadelphia.
No. Beyond the Northeast, there was no major professional basketball.
Okay.
Right. And there's a fan experience we should talk about too, if we have time in this segment. All right. So, there's the fan experience. Like I said, there was no TVs, there was no ESPN, there was no Thursday Night Football, any of that stuff. So this is what you did. So you went to these halls. They were smoke filled,
right?
They were gas lights, right? As a fan, you brought a cowbell or a tin horn. You're making noise. You're paying about, in today's dollars, maybe $5 to $10 for a ticket. And of course, there was gambling.
Shocking.
Which today there's gambling.
Yeah.
Right. So nothing's changed. So, but you just imagine that, and these guys are up against the fence. And if you're a gentleman at the game, you probably got a cigar. And you're going to burn that cigar into the back of one of the players because they're up against the fence. Or the ladies with their fancy hats, they have these hat pins. They would poke players. This was a violent game. The term roughhouse came from the newspapers. Roughhouse basketball again. Roughhouse basketball. So that's what it's all about. So this was brutal.
That is wow. That's wild. Unfortunately, we're up on our next break, but I can't wait to hear more of this. Stay with us, folks. We're back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're talking about basketball and the history of the game we all know and love, founded right here in Springfield, but it has a different past than what you're accustomed to. Dan Genovese, author of the book Rough House on the history of basketball, is joining me across the desk. Dan, thank you so very much. A moment ago, we were talking about the fan experience, and it was in a cage.
Yeah.
People would stick their cigars or hat pins through. What were some of the rules of the game back then? Like, how was it?
Well, that's a great question. Since the ball never went out of bounds, there are no rules, kind of thing.
So there's no stoppage time?
There would be free throws, and here's the beauty: they had one selected free throw shooter.
Okay.
So it wasn't the person that got violated; it was the free throw shooter. So if you had a great
person,
right? So if you had a great free throw shooter, you were great, as opposed to knocking someone who wasn't a great shooter. So,
which is part of the strategy nowadays.
Right. But let me tell you, you've got 10 men in a cage with one referee. If you were a referee, you didn't call a lot of fouls because you were going to feel it in a couple minutes later.
So you talk about the size of the court, 10 men. So here we're looking at the court. So the modern day court is what, 94 feet long?
94 by 50.
94 by 50.
Right.
The historic court is 65 by 35.
Yeah, right. And in some places, like in Westfield, was 63 by 31. So it's even tighter. So you didn't. And okay, so there was no shot clock violation. There was no backcourt violation. So a game would go like this. So the ball would be tipped. It would usually go backwards. And you had one player who had the ball, and there was no backcourt violation. So you could pass
anywhere,
until they decided, let's go, and then they would charge down the court, double dribbling and passing, and elbows, headbutts, scrums. This was the game.
Very rugby-esque.
And that's why they call it Rough House.
Okay,
fisticuffs, common. I mean, just imagine playing, in this cage. This is, as I was saying earlier, if I could time travel, this is where I would go.
Right. No, not here. Here.
Yes, look at this. And what's interesting in this picture, you see the backboard. Right. And
so there's an elevated hoop, right?
Yeah, 10 feet.
Okay.
However, in some arenas or some halls, the fans were like in a balcony. And, most places at that time did not have a backboard. Okay. It was just the hoop.
All right.
But they put the backboard in there to stop fans from preventing balls from going in or assisting balls to go in, depending if it was your team's shooting or not. It's just crazy.
I mean, look at that environment. I mean, a very small environment. It reminds me of like a wrestling cage match, the way you're describing it in this image. It seems like you get 10 burly guys in this small space, just kill the guy with the ball and see who gets most points.
Bowery boys, just punks. That's what they were. but that's the coolness of it.
And here's your Springfield team.
There's a Springfield team. This team here, otherwise known as the Camden Electrics. The Camden Electrics in 1903 and 1904 won the National League championship, but they also played in Springfield as the Springfield team. So you had some tremendous players, traveling around the Northeast. As I said, they were paid extra to show up,
right?
And this was kind of the downfall of the league because they wanted to have a salary cap of $25 a week, and they're playing 4 or 5 games a week.
Right.
Some of the players didn't want that, so they abused the system. Some teams couldn't afford it anymore, so they folded. Some teams would fold because all of a sudden now you're down to 4 teams in the league.
Right.
And they just that was the downfall.
So the modern version, which we recognize probably for the last 50 plus years, when did what we've just talked about morph into what we would call the modern version of basketball?
All right.
I mean, obviously things changed over time, but
right. So the metal cage turned into a net.
Okay.
So into the 30s, they were playing with nets, circling with nets. The NBA didn't kick in until 1946. So you had this evolution, and then ultimately, because they changed the rule to if it tipped your finger, it went to the other team. So they took the nets down and built out the court and built stadiums and courts as you know today.
So really, from the late 40s. It sounds like
the modern era.
Yeah, is sort of the modern era of what we recognize. But for 40, 50 years before that, it was a rough sport.
Rough and tough. And like I said, you didn't want the tall guy on the team.
Even though they were 10-foot hoops, the tall guy really was just good for rebounds.
Because if you went for a layup, this is another thing. If you went for a layup, you usually ended on your butt because they're gonna check you. So you didn't do that. You stood there or one-handed shot, but which was really just
block with one hand and throw with the other.
Yeah, protect yourself.
Interesting, Dan.
And like I said, I wish there was more of this stuff in the Hall of Fame.
Right. I'm surprised there's not.
I'm not sure why, but
we'll have to get John DeLeva from the Hall of Fame in here, grill him on that one.
Please do.
Dan Genovese, I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. Rough House is the name of the book. I'm sure you can find it anywhere.
Actually, I'm going to republish it. It's out of print right now, but this spring it'll be republished. So
fantastic.
And hope to get it in the Hall of Fame and they can sell it there.
Absolutely. Dan, thank you so very much for your time. Great chatting about basketball.
Yeah, great time. Thanks for having me.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.